This is the last time I'm gonna do this for you boys. I still don't know who you are, but the SAG and writer strikes have been hard on everybody, and my airplane doesn't fuel itself. So here it is, boys. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the prosthetics event. Believe you me, they have a lot to talk about today, and one of them can talk a lot. He's from right here in the UK, and the other one is an American, and their podcast is supposed to be pretty decent. But now you get 'em live, so please give it up for Stuart and Todd.
So I was just checking the Zoom app because in this new laptop, I was just updating everything and putting that on there. And I was just checking the last recorded interview, which was Joe Hollow, which was the 26th of November, which was yesterday. So it's exactly a year and 1 day since we did.
Crazy.
It's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you acclimatized back now? You
Almost. I'm just about there. I think tomorrow I'll should be 100%.
Okay.
I can't believe it's been just over a week
mad, isn't it?
since the show. It was very productive. Got to see a lot of people I hadn't seen in ages. It was fun. Hanging out with V was a highlight. That was so much fun.
It was cool. And I really like the fact that, you're able to come this year, and because I've been there a few times without you, and it's nice that everyone can see everything going on at the same time.
I hope we can repeat it next year because I had a great time.
Yeah, it was awesome, wasn't it? And you know what was really nice as well was going to see Falmouth. We went to Falmouth College or uni, say first, which I'd never been to. You've been a couple of years ago, I think, hadn't you? So.
Yeah, 2021, my first prosthetics event. I got to go down to Falmouth, and then afterwards we both went up to Bolton. Falmouth is really cool.
Yeah,
it's a neat. Who knew that there were palm trees in England?
Yeah, it was mad. That fauna, there was a sort of point where you suddenly turned into like weird jungle foliage, and you're like, what? It was
Yeah, well, the way Neil explained it, it being a temperate region with the Gulf Stream coming up, hitting southern England from that part of the English Channel. I was thinking, oh, it's probably pirates just brought it back from the Caribbean, but
that's what I wanted to happen. I didn't want it just something dull like geography. That's just boring. But yeah, no, it was very, very cool, and it was really nice to have a look around their workshop. And it was partly that got me all jazzed about doing up my own space. I've been sending you pictures because I basically sectioned off an area of the workshop as an office, which has always been an office, but it's not been a dedicated little den. So now it's a little digital den, or it will be. It's still boards and foil and insulation at the moment.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of jazzed now. I may after I finish the purge to make some room for things, I may wall in where I am to separate my office from the rest of the space, and maybe I won't have to dust quite as often.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have that. And then when you set up things like meetings and stuff, everything's ready to go. You can just have like a little permanent setup because the background, I've had the curtain and it's kind of clumsy, and I'd like it to be not shameful when people see what's behind me. So
well, I think your workshop is hardly shameful, but it looks great what you've done. You're an ambitious little beaver.
Yeah, it's hard work and trying to shoehorn everything else in with mold making and stuff and teaching stuff. It's all a bit there, but
speaking of which, the mold making, I think our presentation at the prosthetics event was less adversarial than I kind of expected. There was really no pushback to what we were presenting, even though it wasn't like we've drunk the Kool-Aid and this is happening. We're just the messengers and trying to initiate a discussion, because there are pockets within our craft that are doing this and have been doing it for maybe a couple of years now.
Yeah, quite
vigorously, but not everybody's talking about it.
We should probably mention what it is in case people aren't following what.
That's a good idea.
The discussion we gave was called Digital Tools in the Workshop, which was basically looking at the digital elements within a working workshop from a practical effects point of view. I must add, it wasn't a visual effects discussion. It was more still very workshop based, and how those things help in the workshop. And
Yeah, 3D scanning, 3D printing, digital sculpting,
yeah,
with ZBrush and other 3D packages, which have been around for quite some time. In fact, there was a discussion in the 90s that visual effects, that CGI was gonna encroach on our territory and take jobs away from actors and yada yada. Well, it never didn't happen. It's not going to happen, and that discussion is still ongoing. And now it's going to include scanning technology, printing technology. Is this going to take jobs away from mold makers? No. Is this going to take jobs away from sculptors? No. They're just tools.
Yeah, and that was the thing that really interested me, because like I was saying to you about how I'd noticed, like I worked on films where there was a film I did uh, about this time last year, but there was a technical problem that could only be overcome with scanning. It was basically an object that had been feathered. Yeah, this thing that had to be modified, and the only way to do it without damaging it was to scan it. And I remember in the workshop, there was literally nobody else in the workshop that knew what I was doing, or I could talk to about it. So it was like, and I'm not a trailblazing. I'm not. I'm just using like a really cheap scanner, and it's just things I was interested in that I was trying to apply. And it was just really lucky I happened to know how to sort of do this. And then we go to Neil's workshop down in Falmouth, and there's a room with like 20 printers all working away. And it's like, so this, what we notice is that this information isn't evenly spread, but it is very definitely there. And I think that was part of the conversation, wasn't it? To try and initiate a conversation, especially with the younger people, to just make them aware, because it's not being taught evenly. Like Falmouth doing a good job,
Right.
Bolton are doing a good job of it. But there's lots of colleges where it's just not part of what they teach, which is understandable.
Yeah, I think Cinema Makeup School in LA has a degree of it. I don't know how, because it's been a while since I've been there, but I know when Rod Maxwell was teaching there, and I honestly don't even know if Rod's still teaching at Cinema, because he's been busy working with Joel Harlow on some of Joel's projects, scanning and printing bits and bobs for Joel's films,
Yeah.
as well as Joel's independent stuff. But
It's interesting.
in
Yeah.
in my head, the way I'm seeing us approaching, in fact, I just posted on Instagram a little while ago with my book, saying that if we haven't already reached it, we are approaching what I believe to be another milestone in our industry. If you look at the evolutionary timeline of our field, where we had foam latex and rigid collodion and cotton, the stuff that Jack Pierce embraced when he was doing the Karloff makeup for Frankenstein. Collodion, foam latex, silicone, encapsulated silicone, and encapsulated silicone with cap plastic alone. Bondo transfers, thickened pros-aide. And I think with the digital stuff, with 3D scanning and 3D printing, we're approaching another milestone in our field. I don't think it's going to take jobs away from people. It's just going to be another tool in the arsenal. But I think people need to recognize that ship has sailed. Digital's part of what we do now, and it's not going to go away. There are very few shops, if any, that I'm aware of in Los Angeles that are still doing life casting. You had mentioned, that you prefer doing hands, because keeping a hand still enough to scan it can be difficult. But Neil's not doing life casting anymore. Vincent Van Dyke, they're all scanning and printing. In fact, Neil's printing full creature suits using FDM filament printers, which a few years ago would have been unheard of, just because of it's like using a hot glue gun to extrude. There are lines that you can see, but because of the texture in the suits, he was showing us those pieces that he was doing on that big Anycubic printers. You couldn't tell. And once it's painted and in motion, nobody's going to give a shit about it either.
No, and if it's a large suit as well, then those relatively small lines are actually insignificant, really.
Yeah.
Because you might have, I mean, a lot of people are, oh, the printers are not very big. It's like, maybe you can only print something that's a foot square. But like, yeah, but if you've got 25 of those printers going, they're only 500 quid each. I mean, I say only, but how much does a sculptor cost? You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
so
and all the how many tons of wed clay do you need to do a
Yeah.
full creature suit? It's a lot of weight. It's a lot of physical stuff. Then
Yeah.
these things are being sculpted digitally and
Oh,
printed thinly and molded. And, you have trouble with rigid against rigid molds.
yeah.
Undercuts become a problem, but because it's FDM and you're printing it really thin, you can heat the mold and pull that plastic right out of it
Yeah.
and then recycle the plastic.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's not a toxic plastic, is it? It's quite an easy plastic to recycle.
Yeah, because you can't recycle fiberglass. That's just going into a landfill somewhere.
Something I just noticed. I said, that how much does a sculptor cost? That implies that I'm suggesting that sculptors are too expensive. Therefore, there is an example of where a job would be lost, and that's as I said that I kind of thought, does that mean? But I think what I wanted to point out is that you might have the sculpture still being done by a sculptor, but it would be done digitally. And then you would have a team of people who would then fix those pieces together because you've got multiple pieces of FDM print that need to be joined and seamed, and that requires some sculpting ability to do that. Then you've got
Sure.
mold makers who are making molds of that. And the thing is, it's not so much that you would cut back on sculpting. It's more that as a person that could do some sculpting and digital stuff as well, you could do more independently because you don't need. One of the best things about it is you can be anywhere in the world. So, you could have a sculptor working on it remotely, and then, another sculptor could finish it off, or you could have someone else doing hands. Do you know what I mean? So you could sort of
Yeah.
break work.
And we
So,
we did when did I help you out on Rogue Heroes? Was
I
that
think it was 21,
so
2021.
2 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a good example of how, something that would be done practically could be done digitally by more than one person because it could physically be done remotely. I didn't need to send a plaster, and the beauty of it was you were able to do it at night when I was sleeping for me, because you're 7 hours
Right.
time difference. So by the time, when the morning rolled down, I had this file done and I could stick it straight in the printer, and it was like it worked out really well. So it enables you to divide the work up in different ways. It becomes fungible. It becomes something you can actually spread around in a different way, which was completely impossible. And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities, as well as gives you more control if you know how to do this stuff, which is why I'm so keen to speak to younger people about it. Because if the makeup schools I've been at, it's not really part of the curriculum yet because there isn't a standardized way of teaching this. And one of the things that I think we found out, and I'm really pleased we did this talk in front of everybody, and then we did it again at the Ivor, but on a much smaller scale, but at much more depth, was how hard it is to explain this all to people who haven't had any. They're not familiar with it at all necessarily.
Mhm.
So I think one of the things we need.
Which is the irony there is because the kids we're talking to do not know life without computers.
Yes. Just not necessarily use them as tools in the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And it's like Jake Garber. I am quoting Jake Garber all the time. But he said something really poignant when we did our talk with him 2 years ago at the prosthetics event. The more you can do, the more you'll get to do.
Yeah.
And this is, I use the example of Silicon Graphics computers and them refusing to adapt to the world of PCs and operating systems, and they disappeared.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened to Jack Pierce because he refused to embrace new technology as it came along. He did not want to change, and it just pushed him right out of the business because he did not adapt.
Yeah. And
And it's really important if you want to stay relevant in the field you're working in. You need to be able to improvise, overcome, and adapt and grow. It's change is essential for growth. That's you can't deny that.
Yeah. Well, I think the fact that everything's changing regardless in every field, this is the thing, and it's a case of how do you pull this into your work. And I definitely remember not liking ZBrush for the longest time.
Oh yeah, no, much profanity was spewed
Yeah.
when I started playing with it. It was, and even more than that, it was I didn't know where to begin because there were so many buttons, so many things. And I didn't know what to, and I didn't know where to look for documentation to find out how to do things, which that's no longer the case. But I hated it at first because I felt I needed an engineering degree.
Yeah, because it's not I don't think it's a particularly intuitive interface. I think it is once you get used to it,
Mm-hmm.
but when you first look at it, it bears no resemblance to anything practical. And I think that's because things that you do as a sculptor, you don't give them names necessarily, and you certainly don't quantify them numerically. Like if I press a bit harder, I don't say, "Oh, I'm pressing it 70 now," and now I'm pressing it. You just press until it looks right. But when you're using something like ZBrush, they do have to give names to things. They do quantify them as a slider with numbers, and so that kind of feels a bit alien, a bit. But you do get past that point, and it is a tool. And I think certainly with the Maddie Scott Spencer videos, they were a big
Mm-hmm.
revelation to me. And I think what is so odd for most people who are interested in the prosthetic side of things is that the sculpting you normally see with ZBrush is creaturey stuff and big monstery things with spines and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't really bear any resemblance to the stuff that we do when we're working on a life cast. And I've only started doing that recently myself, but there is definitely a point at which you become familiar enough with it that it's a joy to do it, to use it for things you're already using to try and get to. This is a thing. It is a tool. Like you said, it's a tool to get you to do the things you're already doing. So if you're trying to create nice molds and nice jackets and, beautiful keys with no undercuts and nicely splayed, all of that stuff, I've been using ZBrush for that.
Yeah. Well, even for a subtle age makeup, one of the beautiful things I like about ZBrush is and sounds like we're salespeople for ZBrush, which we're not, because I'm unhappy with the company that owns ZBrush, but the software is great, and the layer function. If you want to do some subtle nasal labial folds and a little jowl and maybe some eye bags, you can use the layer functions, and you can have multiple layers, and with each one has a slider, so you can increase and decrease the intensity of what you've just sculpted, and do several variations of a makeup in the time it would probably take you to actually do each of those in clay, or one in clay. You can do several in the same amount of time to show production, get them to sign off, then lock in that design, and then you've got something tangible. Either you can print it or have it in the computer that a sculptor, a clay sculptor, can look at and use as reference and actually do a physical sculpt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is like having superpowers. That's the thing. That's what's so alluring about it. But you still have to know how to make molds and sculpture things. I mean, what I found is the molds that I'd made for the presentation, I purposefully made in order to make me go through the process of doing what would need to be done, and then encounter the problems like inhibition and stuff in a very visceral way, so I could show everyone exactly. Because everyone's talking about inhibition, but no one's ever shown how tragic it is for a piece to be inhibited and what that actually means and what it looks like. So I wanted to go through that process, and what I found was I was thinking the whole way through like a mold maker when I was making those molds, and I was grateful for my mold making background to be able to use it. And I think if you knew ZBrush but you didn't know prosthetics, or you know ZBrush but you don't know about molds, it wouldn't be any good to you. It's kind of like the analogy I used before was like writing. Like you can learn how to write very well, but in order to write a maintenance manual for a landing gear on a fighter aircraft, you'd have to know how to make a fighter aircraft and how to repair it, as well as writing. So just knowing the program doesn't really help you. You still need that background knowledge of form and color and what looks scary and what looks old and all that kind of stuff. And so it's utterly transferable to have all those skills. It's just another skill set that I think is necessary, but also is a bit Kool-Aid of me. But once you have these superpowers, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, I feel fortunate that I have a visual effects background. So it ZBrush came to me once that light bulb moment happened. Then it was all downhill,
Yeah.
smooth sailing. And I do really enjoy it, because the reason I got out of visual effects in the first place is because I'm a I'm a tactile artist. I like to be able to hold the stuff that I'm working on. And I still love CGI, but you couldn't really, when I was doing it, it was all in the computer. What I was building was separated from me by the monitor screen. And now with 3D printing, I can build something in software and print it and turn it around, look at it upside down, and have all the benefits of the practical world. It's great, but it's just a tool. People can use ZBrush, not use ZBrush. They can scan something and not. Most of the time, it's going to be somebody else's job to do the scanning and clean up and get it printed, and then it may be just a core, and they're actually going to sculpt with clay on a printed core.
Yeah.
You can. It's almost like a Chinese food menu. One from column A. You don't have to pick everything. You can pick what you want.
Yeah, I think that was really the main thrust of everything, wasn't it? It was to make people aware of this stuff, not necessarily that they have to know it all, but to be aware of it. Because as you say, if you're on a production, maybe visual effects are doing all the scanning, but somebody in that workshop might need to know how to handle the data as it comes through, or it might need cleaning up. I mean, I remember years ago we had plasterers that were kind of, the union plasterers that were like construction, that we used to do a lot of stuff like live casting and things.
Yeah.
And they might clean it up in a different way. They were keen to get rid of all the imperfections and sand it smooth because that's how they treated things. And I'm like, no, we want the skin texture and the imperfections and the moles and the bumps because that's what the person is, and that's what we're trying to work on. So, you would bring a different mind to it. So I think you could have the same data captured by somebody, but then like costume might need something completely smooth without skin texture because they want to slide clothes on there, or they might want something a bit smaller and detachable so they can get a leg on off to dress a costume. So they might have a body scan for that. We might need a body scan to sculpt a creature suit on. So we may need to reduce the width of the limbs, or something so that we can make the suit a tight suit. And hair and makeup might want.
But that's the beauty of being able to do things digitally is if you had to reduce the size of a plaster cast from a full body life cast to make it a tighter suit, that's a pain in the ass job to have to do all of that sanding and you're measuring so that the left arm is not tighter than the right arm and yada yada. The same amount of reduction overall. In ZBrush, it's a piece of cake.
It's amazing, isn't it? Is that kind of thing that's so exciting, and that's why I feel quite passionate about making people interested in looking into it, because it's incredible things because what I found is it helped me do the things I've already been doing. It just made everything crisp and perfect and sharp, and I could guarantee there were no undercuts, and I can see something, in orthographic view, not perspective view, as you would see normally with your eyes, to guarantee that this is not an undercut or that there's a slight angle here and rounding off corners. And it's just
the transparency function is a godsend.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, it's just.
Well, I hope that listeners will give us comments, saying that we'll get a lot of comments about this, so we can help facilitate a discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think people writing in with their thoughts about it, even if you're not quite sure. Like, we had a fair few comments that were you could tell by the nature of the comments, they didn't like the digital side of things, which is a perfectly legitimate point of view, by the way. I'm not disparaging that at all. But I would like to hear, I'm sure you would, from everyone regarding the subject, because I mean,
pros and cons alike. Again, you're not going to hurt our feelings by saying this is a bunch of rubbish. That's fine.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see.
It's not for everybody, but it's here.
Yeah. One thing as well, I wanted to mention about the software, like you said about ZBrush. I think we use ZBrush mainly because I think it was kind of like the industry standard. I think it's because visual effects, it's part of the pipeline of visual effects. So it's kind of really got its feet under the table there. And then it used to be owned by Pixelogic. It's now owned by Maxon.
Well, Maxon is the company that developed a 3D animation software package called Cinema 4D. That I don't know that it ever became an industry standard, package like Maya or Softimage, and I don't think Softimage even exists anymore. I think it got swallowed up and became part of Maya or 3D Studio Max, which Maya and 3D Studio Max are still used very, very much in the visual effects field, and as is After Effects and
Lightweight.
software called Nuke,
Yeah.
which is another node-based software like Wrap, and people are going to go, what the hell are you talking about, Todd? What's Node? What? This will all be in the notes for this episode to kind of explain some of this, but some of our technology, what is happening in makeup effects, did come from visual effects.
Yeah.
And in fact, Bill Corso started a company called Digital Makeup Group because virtually nothing you see on screen or in movies or television, everything's got a little bit of digital touch up.
Yeah.
Whether it's hiding wig lace or getting rid of some stray hairs because HD has changed how crisp and clear everything is.
Yeah.
And
that's the dog eating itself there, because the only reason you see that wig lace is because of the ridiculous levels of screen resolution, which you don't really need. So now you need to have all this other software to get rid of wig lace, or the corners where a ceiling joins the wall, which you wouldn't have seen 20 years ago, but now it's a thing. So it's crazy. But I wanted to just point out about where I was going with that ZBrush thing, was that although we're using ZBrush, there's also other programs, like I haven't used it, but Mudbox, but that's not cheap either. But
no,
Nomad,
that's by a company that
Autodesk.
makes 3D Studio Max.
Autodesk.
Autodesk, yeah.
Yeah. But there's one called Nomad, which is available on the iPad and I think Android tablets as well. With Nomad Sculpt, which I think is £15 or $15 or thereabouts, one-off payment. And that's an excellent sculpting program.
And then there's Blender, which is free, but it's not particularly intuitive. It's quite complex, but it won't thin your wallet.
No. And I think using things like Procreate on the iPad, or there's some drawing ones. Fresco, I think, is the Adobe one, or just stuff like that. I think I would encourage people to play around with digital tools as toys, just to get familiar with it early on. I think Nomad is definitely worth getting because it's next to nothing.
And if you've already got the Adobe suites because you're using Photoshop and Illustrator for character design or retouching stuff, then you have access to After Effects and Adobe Premiere. After Effects is it's until ZBrush, After Effects was my favorite software because there's virtually nothing you can't do with it. And since I was an animator for years, and After Effects was developed as an animation software, it's a lot of fun. You can dick around in there and just have a great time.
Well, you can, but that, again, that's more like you say, it's a visual effects thing, and certainly from my
but coming back to Bill Corso's deal with his digital makeup group, Bill's rationale is that who better to be doing these digital makeup touch-ups than a makeup artist?
Yeah,
like you made the point that a digital colorist, who understands color better than a compositor.
Yeah,
maybe a makeup artist. I don't know. But it's being done.
Yeah.
And if you have a penchant for the digital side of things, this is definitely something that I think is only going to become more prevalent rather than less so.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually the interesting thing, I think, about the digital side of things, is that I think because digital's sort of bleeding into everything anyway, imagine not having a phone for a day. I mean, most people don't think could function without one. I mean, there's a digital element in everything. But I've never been particularly interested in animation or digital, like digital animation stuff. So for me, After Effects was always tricky, and I was always asking you how to do such and such. But in order to use After Effects, you've got to be doing something other than sculptural stuff, which was
Yeah,
really,
no,
I
it's
think,
definitely a motion image
yes,
software.
exactly. So if you're somebody that's interested in making like figures and sculpting characters, I don't feel like you have to learn that kind of thing
No,
too.
no.
But it's more interesting to point out that they share a lot more than you think. So it might be that through the medium of, I'll give you an example, through the medium of being interested in sculpture, you learn ZBrush. That may lead you to do other things digitally, and you'll find that you can do things in 5 years with After Effects that don't feel so different from what you've learned in
Yeah,
ZBrush.
well, here's an example. I think I told you this story at some point while I was over for my visit. Um, I'd started my own production company in Los Angeles, and I bought this is in 1990, 91. We were talking about optic nerve and the visual effects for Babylon 5 and Sequest, DSV. So we were all using software called Lightwave predominantly. And I just bought a desktop video production suite. There was a switcher and pretty all contained thing in an Amiga computer, which I wish I still had, because for the time it was pretty sweet. But part of this desktop video package had a 3D animation software built into it called Lightwave, where you could do 3D logos and fly them in, fly them out. And you could do all kinds of really cool stuff. And Lightwave has gotten so much more advanced now than it was then.
Yeah.
But I was using it for a lot of the commercial work that I was doing, company logos that could fly in and be real 3D.
Yeah.
And it looked very cool. I was like, oh, this is neat. I'm pretty good at this. I think I want to pursue this. So from actual production, where I was shooting and editing video for corporate clients and advertising clients, I got really turned on by this 3D stuff. And that one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I find myself doing previs for films like Contact and visual effects shots for My Favorite Martian and Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves, and it just kind of blossomed from there. But again, the more you can do, the more you'll get to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just be open-minded. You may find that in playing around with some of this stuff, you don't like it at all, and you want to wish you hadn't wasted the time on it. But you might find out that you have a skill for something you had no idea you had a skill for.
Well, that's why I think Nomad is a good thing to start with, because you it's not a lot of investment at time. You can just doodle around and have fun and make fun little characters. It's just a way of wiring your brain to be able to work within that field. Because one of the things I found very interesting was that I've been using ZBrush more recently for mold making than sculpting. I don't really sculpt characters, because I've never really sculpted characters. I've never been one for sculpting monster maquettes or full creatures body, figures, the Steve Wang kind of stuff. That, as cool as that is to me, I've never felt the calling to do it. I really like masks and prosthetics. And I've made a lot of molds in my life. And I found that making molds, weirdly, even though ZBrush was never designed for making molds, I'm using it to make molds. And it's given me, like if I have a head and I want to set it into a block like you would for a core, I can make, a cube and splay it, and it's all symmetrical, and then I'll nudge it to fit the face, just like as it was a block of clay. But in my head, I'm thinking of it as a clay, but I get the beauty of being able to make it symmetry and guarantee there are no undercuts anywhere. And it's flawless and it's perfect. So from a mold making point of view, it's really useful. So I think that same thing will happen, that you'll become familiar with the tool, but you use the tool for what you want. It's not the case that the tool shapes you. It's more that you figure it out. And that for me was quite hard, trying to find tutorials on certain things, or I would know really good sculptors, but because they never had to make something exactly 2 mil thick all over, that wasn't a thing that they know how to do, for example. It's like, because that's a mold making thing. And so even with all of that, you still got to bend it to your will. So I'm excited about what, if there was a whole generation of people that started playing with it, the kind of shit you would see in 5 years from now, because they'd be using it for the things they're already interested in, and that's the beauty of it. It's a tool. To learn the tool so you can use it to make what you want to make more efficiently or, remotely. That's the thing. Imagine getting work from where you live. You don't have to relocate to another country or another city to create stuff.
Yeah, and you don't have the monumental shipping of sending a full head and shoulders plaster bust of somebody from Toronto to London, or from Denver to London, and hoping that it arrives in one piece.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's crazy. It is just magic in that regard, and it blows my mind. But yeah, I was really pleased we got to speak about it on stage, and yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what the digital tools in the workshop means to you. Whether it's something you've no interest in whatsoever, you hate it, it's not sculpting, get away from me, I hate you, or is it a case of I'm curious, or is it a case of I'm interested, but it just sounds so expensive and I'm scared of investing the time, and where would I find out, blah, blah, blah. I think we'd love to hear all of that. You should email us definitely at stuartandtodd@gmail.com, please, because I'm keen to hear what other people think. I know what I think. I know what you think, but I like it when people hit us with something I hadn't even considered. I'm like, oh yeah,
me too.
So that would be very, very cool. I wrote a conclusion to all the discussions and thoughts we had, which I sent you on, and I'm just going to read the first two paragraphs, if I may. I'll put this on the blog post, but basically the conclusion, I think, to this phase of thinking, because there has to become a point where we're like, okay, we've gone around the houses with this, and I think we know the presentation that we did well enough, and it'll be, say, the notes will cover all of that.
I don't know. Are you hearing all these notification sounds coming from my phone?
No, I didn't hear any of that.
I should have shut it off, because I've had some Three Stooges and Warner Brothers stuff going on.
No, well, that's the beauty of these mics.
Having a serious discussion and these ridiculous sounds in the background. Sorry.
No worries. So we got basically my conclusion there was, okay, so makeup artists typically like makeup. It's a tactile medium, and they enjoy products, how they feel, how they smell, and how they respond to brushes and pressure. Making prosthetics similarly has its tactile qualities, and it's hard to separate these sensations from the very nature of the joy in the work. It's little wonder then that the same group of people may not have had developed an extensive love of digital versions of the same work. Doing a digital makeup effect in Photoshop requires the makeup artist's mindset, but somehow it's not the same thing. And I think this reluctance to do digital work can put the makeup community at a disadvantage. And that basically sums up, I think, why we did this talk the way we did it. I'm not sure how it landed. It sounded like it went down pretty well, but I also became very aware of how difficult it was to impart this without giving like lessons on each of the aspects of it. But I think this is going to be the problem with learning this stuff, is lots of people are going to take it different ways. Because I said this at the presentation, I'm scared that there are makeup tutors who are going to panic and go spend a bunch of money on expensive laptops and ZBrush licenses, and you'll do nothing with them because nobody knows how to use it. And so I think the thing is to become familiar with it through play, through enjoying, not on real jobs. Start at the same time you're learning how to do Marcel Wave or how to prepare skin for whatever, or clean up hair. While you're doing those things, also be playing with Nomad or Procreate, and just kind of get used to using digital tools to create things that you already enjoy making, and integrate it into your thinking. And over time, will become fluent in that way. And I think then you can start enjoying digital tools, because I would hate for makeup to be done digitally by a visual effects department who are not makeup artists. I think there's no reason why hair couldn't do it, why costume couldn't do it, why prosthetics makeup couldn't do it.
And bottom line, it's really, the learning curve is not that difficult. It's a gentle curve that, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Seriously.
Yeah. And I don't mean talking to it. I mean, I'm the same. I don't feel particularly clever with this at all. It's purely a familiarity with the interface, and once you get used to it. And also the other thing is, you could get something like ZBrush Core, which is a much
and the ZBrush Core Mini, which is
that's free,
completely free.
Yeah.
It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of the full version, but at least you can dip your toes in and get a sense of what the interface is like, what some of the tools can do, and move on from there. And then if you really do like it, then you can upgrade. And it's not a huge power drain the way some of the Adobe software is. That ZBrush runs, the full version of ZBrush runs great on my laptop.
Yeah.
I have to have the maximum RAM on my laptop that you can put into it, but it handles the file sizes just fine.
And it's also down to the amount of polygons. So, if you have something like 50 million polygons, then yeah, it's going to struggle.
Yeah, that's gonna
You don't
choke
need to.
anybody's computer.
Yeah, but that's like saying, I'm not going to go for a run because I can't run a marathon. It's like, well, you don't have to run a marathon. You could just run half a mile. You know what I mean? So it's the same. You can have a much lower poly count model. It doesn't need to be, like you say, it doesn't need to be a massive, brand new gaming laptop to do that at all. And with the scanning, well, we cover all this in the notes. With the scanning, I mean, I saw a Black Friday deal for the Pop 3 scanner was like £415 or something, which it's a lot of money for a toy, but it's not necessarily a lot of money for a college to get one for their department so that everyone can start using it. That's the thing. If the price comes down low enough that a lot of people adopt it,
Yeah.
then that's when it becomes more standardized.
And I guess you could consider it a toy compared to the Artex Space Spider, which is a $30,000 scanner and will capture every nook and cranny in your face perfectly. But it's a pain in the ass to learn how to use. We swore a lot. I think some of the profanity we elicited last year is still hanging in space above my house.
Well, the trouble is the software is such a big part of how the scanner works. And they've obviously, this is the other thing, like I think there's only so much money they can make selling scanners. So for a lot of those companies, I think the money is in them having proprietary software.
Well, and they're also developed by engineers for engineering projects, for the automotive industry, for the manufacturing industry, for doing pipe fitting manifolds and engine blocks and that kind of stuff. So they're not designed for use by artists yet.
Yeah.
I think some future iterations will have parameters that we need. I won't go into detail because we have it in the notes, but the Pop 2, which you and I have, now they have the Pop 3. It's perfectly adequate for life casting, scanning. Doesn't capture fine skin texture detail, but you really don't need it. And it used to be that, as you already mentioned, that they would sand that off in the cleanup process.
Yeah, it is amazing actually how
But
good.
the physical landmarks are all there.
Yeah,
and they're dead accurate.
yeah. I mean that Pop 2 and the Pop 3, I think they're similar quality. It's just I think the Pop 3 does a better job of tracking. But even for the lack of detail, it's still pretty detailed. It's not necessarily poor texture detail, but like you say, you don't really need it. But it's really accurate. I mean, we've printed things from direct scans. I've used calipers to check. They are dead on accurate.
Yeah.
So, I think, and the thing is, at the end of the day, it's how you handle the data once.
And the Pop 2, it's untethered. You're recording directly to your phone if you want.
Yeah.
So you have the freedom. You're not tethered to a laptop computer screen. So you're right there and looking at your phone right where the scanner is. With pretty much every other scanner, tethered or untethered, you don't have a monitor. You're looking at a computer screen that is somewhere not in front of your face where you need to be. It's kind of like flying a helicopter.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just the things you could do if you were making a helmet or a mask, you could make something that fitted somebody perfectly. You don't need all that detail anyway. And a highly detailed scan just means you need a bigger computer to deal with all that anyway. So the fact you $30,000 scanner means you're also probably going to need an $8,000 computer. So do you know what I mean? So suddenly it starts amping up. Whereas at the Pop 2, because it's a much smaller file size, it's fewer polygons, but it's still I
It's
have
still a
done
lot of
jobs-
polygons.
I have done jobs with a scan that I took with Pop 2, and it was perfectly good. And I love it. I think they're fantastic. And I really think that it's more, it's it's so that you could start playing with scans and incorporating them in your work, so that even if you work on a low level scan, because here's the thing, you might work on a big movie, say you're part of a crew, and the scan data that you get is from a £30,000 scanner or a $30,000 scanner. But the point is, the job of cleaning up in ZBrush is the same. It's the same work. Sending it to a printer is the same work. So it's learning the software and how to do that, even on a lower resolution version. It is just like learning how to drive a car. Like if you might buy a $5,000 car and it works, and then if you won the lottery and you had a $100,000 car, you're still learning with the same. It's the same rules of the road. It's the same how you park. It's the same. Everything's the same. It's just a nicer car, but you still have to learn how to drive. And I think that's what I feel that a cheap scanner like that would do you. You know, it gives you that the ability to start playing the game, so that
Mhm.
you can take part in the conversation. Because
And that's an important, but that's an important point, taking part in the conversation.
yes,
Even if you are not going to be doing the work yourself, understanding the process allows for better communication between departments, because you know what is needed.
yeah,
You can communicate without things getting all jumbled up in translation.
yeah. Because even within the visual effects world, there isn't one job. There's lots of little jobs, and I think no one knows everything in any department. So it's perfectly acceptable to not know lots of things. I mean, I'm interested in sculpting, but I'd never really been interested in animation. So the moving of something, or the articulation and rigging a thing, even though I've seen it done, it doesn't float my boat. But you know, a sculpt is like, ooh, I get very
Yep.
excited about. So you never know what you might find interesting. You know, you might find that there's little rabbit holes within the digital world that you didn't even think. Like
Yeah,
you
and stop motion animation is a whole different animal from computer animation, where you have to create armatures and molds that you're casting foam or silicone into a mold that's got an articulated armature inside, and you've all of the stuff that we as effects people, it's all the same tools.
yeah, it's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Makes me go sculpt now. Except I've got to finish my workshop. I was thinking this would be like bumpers, but I think this is a pretty good standalone episode, to be honest.
Yeah. How long? This is nice. This is fun.
It's very good. And I think we'll put the notes, like I say, to the presentation in this, and there'll be some extensive notes as well, just in the show notes, discussing things. And we'll put some links to some of the bits and bobs that we've mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. This one felt really good.
Yeah. And I think it's nice to have a conversation about it, having had a bit of time since the event, because then you've had time to process and percolate things.
Well, also it seems to be flowing a little more easily. It doesn't feel forced,
No.
because it's just becoming more familiar.
Yeah. Well, we've gone through it so much. We've written so much. We put so much work into that presentation. It was about 6 weeks work. And part of me feels like it didn't go as well as I would have liked.
Well,
But
no,
I-
but I don't think that had anything to do with us per
no,
se.
no, that's what I was going to say.
It was the venue. They couldn't accommodate what we had written it to be.
It wasn't even that. It was more that I realized as we explained it, how hard this was going to be to get across in its entirety, because it requires you to know. As I was going into like the mold making stuff at the end, even though I had pictures of it and had the molds there, I realized there might be people in the room that didn't necessarily understand what I meant, because you'd have to have made molds to really appreciate it. There were people that really dug it, but it's one of those things where it's like, wow, there's this layer of difficulty that's computer based, and there's a whole layer of difficulty that's mold related. Even if you weren't using computers, you'd have to understand, what collapsible cores were, or undercuts, or you still get people.
It'll be interesting to see if we're able to, if I'm able to come back over to the UK again for the prosthetics event next year, to see what, if anything, how things have changed, moved forward in this arena.
Yeah.
From what we just presented, how much more comprehension there is.
Yeah. Well, I've
or
already seen
not.
a few. There's a few. I think it might be John Schroyer on Facebook had.
Yeah, Schroyer's been doing some stuff very similar to us. He's doing 3D printed cores and stuff.
But with interchangeable like inserts and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And again, it's that thing of like doing stuff that gives you advantages in the thing you're already trying to do. So if
Might
you,
be John might be worth doing an episode with.
yeah, I'll ask him. That sounds like a plan. Because I'm interested to see, because I am also wary of becoming so enamored with digital that we bore the people that are not interested in the digital side of things because it's still about prosthetics. But it's just, I think it never was part of making prosthetics before because there wasn't enough integrated technology that would do it. But now printers are cheap enough and plentiful enough, scanners are cheap enough and available, the software is becoming more and more familiar
Yeah,
to
the
people.
end result is still going to be um, cast silicone or baked foam latex in a mold, whether it's the mold made traditionally or from a 3D print.
Mm.
You know, what's the stuff that's getting glued onto some actor's face is still going to be the prosthetic material that we've been using all along, or for quite some time. You know, they haven't started printing silicone prosthetics yet, though that's on the horizon. That will happen.
Mm.
And to be able to print silicone prosthetic straight out of the printer, ready to glue on somebody's face in different durometers, so that it's softer in one place and a little firmer around the edges. You know,
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
yeah. Well, you know, if I firmly, if you can think it up, somebody's going to make it happen at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's one of the next logical evolutions of what we're talking about.
But just like
But
anything,
now it's still, you know, foam latex. But you can bake foam latex in a 3D printed mold, because
yeah,
you don't have to
blew
worry.
my mind.
You don't have to worry about the inhibition.
Yeah, as long
It's,
as it's
you
not
know,
too high.
it's crazy.
Yeah, as long as it's not too high a temperature, it should be fine.
Yeah,
But
well, you're not gonna be baking it any warmer than, shouldn't be baking any warmer than 60 centigrade or 140 Fahrenheit.
yeah,
You just have to, you cook it longer. If you follow the manufacturer's directions, which I think still say, you know, 185 degrees Fahrenheit, well, that gives you a very, very small window before you've overcooked it and you've ruined the foam. At a
mm,
lower temperature, you're going to get softer foam because it's baked slower at a lower, at a lower temperature, and you've got a much bigger window for getting it out. So if you get distracted on something else and you take it out an hour and a half later than you had wanted to get it out, the foam's going to still probably be fine, just fine.
yeah, yeah.
But if
That's
at 185 degrees, if you keep it in the oven an hour and a half longer than it should have been in there,
yeah,
it's going to be crumbly and fucked up completely.
yeah. No, I think that's a very good point because yeah, that gradual slowing down process with foam, it's a lot less stressful as well when you don't have to be on it because you don't
Yeah.
know for a fact it's perfectly baked. And
Yeah.
so
So resin molds, there's no problem because, you can't remelt the resin once it's been cured. But even with FDM, once the foam's gelled, the plastic of the mold is going to be soft, but it's not gonna collapse. It's not gonna flatten out.
yeah, and just leave it to cool down before you
Leave it to
start.
cool down. Boom.
Yeah. So yeah, you have that aspect of things. It blows my mind because it
Oh,
just
I know,
doesn't.
it's exciting. It's
It's really
exciting.
exciting. It's really exciting. But it's still for all of that, you still have to be able, the thing you've sculpted, the thing you bought, still has to look cool. You still have to do a good job of sculpting it and designing it. That doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No,
it's still
the computer's not going to sculpt it for you.
yeah. And that's the thing. You could have something where it's done digitally, but then because you can become so enamored with the process, you fail to notice that it's a shit looking makeup. You know what I mean? So it's like you still need that critical eye, and it's becoming familiar enough with the tool that you don't really think about the tool. You're just like driving. You don't think about how to change gear or how to make the steering wheel. You just steer and drive, and don't hit anything. You drive according to the laws of the road, but you're not actively thinking how to control the vehicle, and that's how it should be with tools. They should be familiar enough that you just use them the way you want to get what you need. At the moment, it's still very much the case with digital. I think everyone's very, very conscious of the tool itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's an indication of how new it is. But with time,
well, listeners, if you have access to the Gnomon School, that's silent G, it's GNOMON. Check out Maddie Scott Spencer's Intro to ZBrush tutorials. Changed our ZBrush world.
It did, and that's the thing. It's the ongoing effect, isn't it? Like it changed everything. But it took a few years for it to change. It wasn't just knowing how to use ZBrush. It was then twisting it into your will. And I use it very differently to how maybe you would as well. So,
and I am far from being an expert. I'm still maybe an advanced novice.
Yeah, but you have fun with it though, right?
Yeah. No, I can create things that can be used. I have created things that have been used on stage and on film.
Yeah, and I was really pleased when you came over that we were able to watch DSS Rogue Heroes together.
That was great.
We watched 3 episodes an evening. It was really good fun. But yeah, it was good to see it all going on.
And now I'm addicted to Toast of London. Thank you very much.
Yes, I can hear you, Clem Fandango.
Yeah, I'm pleased you like that. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a hoot.
It's out there, but it's pretty good. Right, we should probably wrap this up. I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea. Okay, man. Have a good day. Look after yourself.
Thanks. You too.
Take care, man.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
You can get in touch through our Facebook page or email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com. Check the show notes for more information. If you enjoyed this episode, tell someone else and help us grow by sharing it on social media. Thanks for listening.